But Ar-Pharazôn was not yet deceived, and it came into his mind that for the better keeping of Sauron and of his oaths of fealty, he should be brought to Númenor, there to dwell as a hostage for himself and all his servants in Middle-earth. To this, Sauron assented as one constrained, yet in his secret thought he received it gladly, for it chimed indeed with his desire. Hello everyone. In this video I'm going to answer a question that I have seen pop up in almost all discussions I've encountered related to Sauron's time on Númenor in the Second Age. Did he carry the One Ring with him when he was taken as a hostage of King Ar-Pharazôn? To me, the answer is clear, but I will explain why this is still a topic that people discuss to this day. I'm not here to really convince anyone to agree with me, but I do hope that my answer and explanations will make it an almost absurd proposition that Sauron would leave the ring behind in Mordor as he began his campaign of corruption through his surrender to a corruptible king. In the year 3262 of the Second Age, Sauron was taken as a prisoner to Númenor, and we are told that Sauron forged the One Ring in Mordor in the year 1600 of the same age. To put that gap into perspective, Sauron forged the One Ring when the second ruling queen, Tar-Tilperion, ruled Númenor, the 10th monarch, one who lived for over 400 years. From Tar-Tilperion, we pass through Minastir, Ciarán, Atanamir, and so on, until we reach the 25th monarch, Ar-Pharazôn. Many kings and queens have passed, no living memory on the Isle of Sauron's evil past deeds, no true understanding of the power he holds. Yet Sauron himself did not understand the might of Númenor in its last years, greater than the force that had humbled him in the War of the Elves and Sauron at the turning of the 17th century of the Second Age. Over 1500 years later, Sauron had grown in strength in Middle-earth again, still harbouring a hatred of Númenor from an ancient defeat. He was said to be putting forth his might, pressuring coastal cities of Middle-earth, and boasting an ego the size of Mount Doom itself, he declared himself the King of Men, a king of men who would drive Númenorians into the sea, and a king who would destroy their realm, if that might be. Great was the anger of Ar-Pharazôn at these tidings. As he pondered long in secret, his heart was filled with the desire of power unbounded, and the sole dominion of his will. And he determined, without counsel of the Valar, or the aid of any wisdom but his own, that the title of King of Men he would himself claim, and would compel Sauron to become his vassal and his servant. For in his pride, he deemed that no king should ever arise so mighty as to vie with the heir of Eärendil. The scarlet sails come up out of the sunset, coastal dwellers fled in fear, and after stepping foot on the shores of Middle-earth, Ar-Pharazôn and the vast army of Númenorians marched through the Silent Lands for 7 days, the only sound being the trumpets declaring their march towards Sauron's land. On a hill, the king sat on his throne, surrounded by his forces, and his heralds were sent to command the Dark Lord, or so-called King of Men, to come before this true king and swear fealty. Sauron came, offering no battle, his forces being unable to withstand such a display, the power and majesty of the kings of the sea being greater than any rumour of them. Knowing he could defeat them another way, he did as the king asked, even convincing men around the king, but not the king himself, that he was fair and wise. The king returned to Númenor with his hostage, and Tolkien tells us that in only 3 years, Sauron moved from hostage to closest to the secret counsels of the king. The question is, was his master ring with him? Not only does Tolkien say that Sauron had the ring with him, but that he naturally had the One Ring, telling us that it made sense when it came to Sauron's relationship with the ring and his purposes on Númenor to take this ring with him. In a letter from 1958, Tolkien says, "He naturally had the One Ring, and so very soon dominated the minds and wills of most of the Númenorians. I do not think Ar-Pharazôn knew anything about the One Ring. The elves kept the matter of the rings very secret, as long as they could. In any case, Ar-Pharazôn was not in communication with them." If you think about the second part of this quote about the elves, then this is backed up not only by the secrecy surrounding the Rings of Power on the part of the elves, but the relationship of the rulers of Númenor with the elves for many centuries. The shadow had long fallen on Númenor by the time Ar-Pharazôn was king. From the 11th king, Tar-Minastir, being envious of the elves, the 12th king, Tar-Ciriatan, constraining his father to surrender the scepter so he could rule, the 13th king, Tar-Atanimir, openly speaking against the ban of the Valar, the establishment of those faithful to the Valar and elves against the king's men who opposed the ban of the Valar during the reign of the 14th king, Tar-Ancalimon, all between the 18th and 24th centuries of the Second Age, a long period of mistrust and envy growing, creating distance between the elves and men of Númenor, their ancient friendship abandoned by all but the faithful. In more recent history regarding Ar-Pharazôn, the 20th king, Ar-Adunacor, banned the speaking of Quenya, a language of the elves which had been used by men of Númenor, mostly for ceremonial purposes. The faithful began to be openly persecuted. Elves were not trusted and were no longer welcomed by the ruling class on the Isle. Why would its last king know of these rings? And more importantly, if he did know of them, why would he not immediately seek this master ring from Sauron after approaching his land and defeating him without a fight? This is my own speculation, but I'm sure many of you watching who know of Ar-Pharazôn and his personality would perhaps add him to the top of the list of men who would desire the One Ring, and who would be a dreadful wielder of its power as the mightiest king east of Aman in control of an empire. Based on his actions here and the lack of communication with the elves, who were already keeping the rings the most secret of secrets, Ar-Pharazôn was unaware of the One Ring. For those maybe wondering why the king wouldn't notice this ring, let me first say that if he did see a ring upon Sauron's finger, merely looking at it does not always cause some desire for it. This is, I think, a belief caused by adaptations of Tolkien's works. It is supposed to look plain, unadorned, the least of rings, despite being the greatest of all of them. But there's a distinct possibility that the king would not have noticed any ring upon Sauron's fair form, and the possibility that the treasure-hungry and possessive Númenorians would have preferred plundering other more obvious treasures, as they had been doing for centuries. We need only look to the Lord of the Rings for answers here, where a very special moment occurs when Frodo notices a ring of power upon the hand of Galadriel, a wielder of Nenya, one of the three rings, a ring that Sam Gamgee only saw as a star on her finger when it was revealed. Frodo, with his perception as the ring bearer, was able to see this ring upon her finger when others may not have seen it.
She lifted up her white arms and spread out her hands towards the east in a gesture of rejection and denial. Eärendil, the evening star, most beloved of the elves, shone clear above. So bright was it that the figure of the elven lady cast a dim shadow on the ground. Its rays glanced upon a ring about her finger. It glittered like polished gold, overlaid with silver light, and a white stone in it twinkled as if the elven star had come down to rest upon her hand. Frodo gazed at the ring with awe, for suddenly it seemed to him that he understood.
Galadriel tells Frodo directly that it cannot be hidden from the ring-bearer, and one who has seen the eye. Ar-Pharazôn was not a ring-bearer, he had no knowledge of them, and he was in front of the Lord of the Rings, one who had taken a fair form to meet with him. Surely, Sauron at this time would be able to shield this ring, keep it secret on his finger, deceive those gazing upon him. A time when he was able to hide his true intentions and will from those he sought to deceive. This should answer questions about Sauron secretly taking this ring with him. Not only does Tolkien say that Sauron took the ring and used it, but he also says that following a defeat through a miracle, a direct action of God the Creator, Eru, the sinking of the island itself, Sauron carried the ring back with him as he returned to Mordor. Though reduced to a spirit of hatred born in a dark wind, I do not think one need boggle at this spirit carrying off the One Ring, upon which his power of dominating minds now largely depended. This is one question I know for sure will be asked in relation to this video. How did Sauron as a spirit carry the ring? I will have to disappoint you here and say that I don't want to answer that question in this video, simply because it's deserving of its own video, and my explanation goes into detail about the forms of the Ainur, their relationship to the physical world, Sauron's relationship with this ring of power, and an explanation of terms like Ealar, Incarnate and Fana. It would almost be disappointing to just add it here as part of an answer to another question. I am only mentioning this quote because it adds to the evidence of Sauron having the ring with him in the first place. After explaining that Tolkien himself said that Sauron took the ring with him, to and from Númenor, with my own explanations as to how the king would not know of this ring or understand it, why is there a debate about this? It's all related to one quote from the Silmarillion, where it is said that after Sauron's spirit arose out of the deep and passed as a black wind over the sea to Mordor, there he took up again his great ring in Barad-dûr, and dwelt there, dark and silent, until he wrought himself a new guise, an image of malice and hatred made visible, and the eye of Sauron the Terrible few could endure. That's it, and I'll be honest and say that I have never read this quote as meaning Sauron left the ring behind. This ring that Tolkien says Sauron largely depended on for his power of dominating minds. The ring he clearly would have made use of in Númenor, the place where in 3 years he swiftly moved from hostage to chief counsellor. Don't get me wrong, I can see how this quote can be read in that way, but I find it to be such an awkward interpretation, personally. Though I will admit, Tolkien could have worded this in a better way to avoid confusion, if I am right with my own interpretation of it. To take up the ring again means there must have been a period when he wasn't using the ring. And that makes sense. There was a time when Sauron wasn't actively using the ring, when Númenor was destroyed alongside his physical form. From using the ring on the Isle, he was killed in the destruction of Númenor, death being the separation of body and spirit. In this state, a spirit forced from his physical form, Sauron was not actively using the ring. He retrieved it and returned with it to Mordor. Once he was back in his domain, his tower, he took up the ring again and actively began using it, taking shape. This is how I have always read this text, and don't see this as any type of contradiction at all. He simply returned after a catastrophic world-changing event, and once again started to use his ring, no longer having to use it when Númenor was no longer present in the world. To me, it makes little sense for Sauron to not take the ring he forged for the purposes of domination with him to Númenor to aid in his domination of them. If he can safely bring it with him and make use of it, he would, and seemingly he did, his already great powers of persuasion and corruption being enhanced by this object. One slightly awkwardly worded quote from the edited Silmarillion does not for me overrule Tolkien's own thoughts and letters, where he says clearly that Sauron made use of this ring and naturally took it with him. It also doesn't mean that I believe Sauron needed to use this ring to corrupt them. It could have made their domination happen sooner than if Sauron never took it. The Númenorians, so close to falling completely, over 3,000 years from when their great island was raised, were then overwhelmed by a Sauron who understood their hatred and jealousy of immortals, their fear of death, dominating them, corrupting them with his own cunning, and, naturally, the One Ring. Thanks for watching. What's your answer to this question? Have you always believed Sauron took the ring? Or do you think he left it in Mordor? Does Sauron taking it maybe diminish the deviousness of his takeover of Númenor? Does it diminish the fallen nature of the Númenorians themselves, with no need for such an object to lead them into folly? Please share your thoughts in the comments, and I will once again reply to as many of you as I can, in the comments section itself or in a response video. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already and you enjoyed this video. If you want to support the Red Book in another way, I have a Patreon with various benefits available through the link in the description. I'll see you on the next chapter of the Red Book.